Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome to the Center of Love, and we have one brand new guest, Randy. Oh, there you are. Welcome, Randy, and good to see you back, Ben. Very good to see you back, and Wazzy is second time here. Wazzy, by the way, is a Lakota name for the cedar tree. I thought that's pretty interesting. I used to work with cedar for 11 years, building chairs out of it. And who else? Richard? Richard's been here a few times.
Yeah.
Anyway,
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
is this your third time, you said?
No. 1, 2,
Yes.
Yeah,
and three.
so it's your third time. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so welcome to the Center of Love, whose mission statement is to gather with like-hearted individuals in community to support and share wisdom and healing with each other and the world at large, to build bridges and bring people together in the name of oneness and love. And there's that word, love. It's in the title of our organization. But you know, it's an enigmatic word. It's sometimes difficult to interpret, very complex emotion. And in the English language, we have one word for the word love. I love my father. I love my brother, sister. I love my dog. I love pizza. I love my work. But you know, the ancients, the Greek philosophers, had 6 words for the word love. They differentiated the complex emotion of love. And their words for love were agape, eros, philia, storge, philantia, and xenia. And very briefly, agape is used in ancient texts to mean unconditional love. And I think we all feel that at times, although we aren't aware that we're feeling this unconditional love. But quite often it's unconditional love for our children. Regardless of what they do, we're going to love them. And sometimes it's love of a relative who may have transgressed us, but we still love them. Eros denotes the erotic, intimate love. Philia, here's an interesting one, means affectionate regard for, philia, friendship, brotherly or sisterly love. And a little bit of UFI, useless freaking information. I'm a specialist in UFI. The city of Philadelphia, the root word is philia, Philadelphia, and their slogan was the city of brotherly love. So there you go. Storge means love and affection, especially for parents and children and vice versa. Related to agape, which is unconditional love, but agape generally, it's a universal love. It's the love that we can feel for people that are going through a very difficult time right now, people in Florida and North Carolina, people in Palestine, people in Ukraine. It's that unconditional love. So storge is generally between parents and children. Philantia, here's an interesting one, and I think it relates to us here too, denotes self-love. But not in the vain way, but in a love for oneself, for regard of one's own health and happiness. And, you know, that's what a lot of this organization is about. And finally, xenia is the concept of hospitality. It's the love of strangers. It's guest friendship. It's being particularly caring for and having regard for, say, a visitor or a stranger. So there you have 6 different types of love. So here at the Center of Love, we receive inspiring messages to promote unity, growth, love, and healing. And we gain new tools. We learn about and gain new tools to put into our emotional and spiritual toolboxes. We work on becoming more balanced individuals here. Consequently, we support all those that are going through the journey of personal growth and healing. And today we're privileged to hear from one of the most erudite individuals I know, who's going to provide us with another tool to put into our toolbox. And today Oliver is going to share with us his perspectives on triggers. Those are the events that destabilize us. He is going to walk us through the why and what about triggers and hopefully give us a recipe for how to respond to these events in our life that can destabilize us. So please welcome a man who's read more books than I've had hot meals. Please welcome Oliver Belisle.
Right, okay. Triggers. Why talk about triggers at the center of love? Well, as you know, the center of love is designed to be a safe space where we honor and respect all views and perspectives, even, or perhaps especially, the ones we don't agree with, right? It's a place where we can focus on matters of the heart first and of the mind second. And because we agree to lead with love and to let love motivate and guide our actions in the world, I think triggers is a relevant topic because it's hard to be in a place of love. It's hard to have your heart open when you are offended, angry, ashamed, in a place of judgment. I've noticed, and perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's possible to love and judge at the same time. You're either doing one or the other. And so a conversation on triggers is interesting, it's relevant, it's worthwhile. And because if it hasn't already happened to you, it will happen in the future. There will be a Sunday where, despite all of our best efforts to support and care for and honor each other, someone is going to say something that's going to trigger you. And so by having this conversation now, we can kind of get ahead of it because it's going to happen. We're human. And triggers are an essential and inevitable, and I would say useful part of life. They are useful for me, but only because I've learned to regard them very differently than I used to. And so for me, when I think of being triggered, and I think of what it's like, the first thing that comes to my mind is always anger. When I get triggered, it's almost always anger, frustration, scorn, contempt, these very like strong, angry, toxic types of emotions. And so I guess maybe what I should do is circle back and tell you all, hello, my name is Ollie, and I'm a recovering rageaholic. That's right, folks. It might be hard for some of you to believe, others probably not so hard. But our good friend Cressa helped me realize this a while back. I realized that I never experienced sadness or depression when I was young because I had the bonfire of uncontrollable rage to keep me warm, right? I never experienced those things as a child or as a young person because anytime something would happen to trigger feelings of shame or insecurity or embarrassment, I would throw those logs onto the fire of anger. And I felt none of those things. I just felt pure, destructive rage. That was my coping mechanism. That was my drug of choice. Whenever life threw me a curveball, whenever something happened, a person did something to me that hurt my feelings, no problem. Anger was my superpower. I could throw everything in the fire, and I must admit, there's a part of my anger that has a watch the world burn type of quality to it, where when I would get angry, there was no thought of consequences. There was no thought of what might happen if I do these things. I would just act out of anger. And as you can imagine, that creates a lot of problematic situations in one's life. Relationships are ruined, altered forever, because when you say something, you can't take it back. You can apologize, you can try to make amends, but once those words leave your lips, it's over and irreparable damage can be done. So that's my relationship with anger and the reason that I became interested in triggers. because I realized after some years of trial and error that my anger wasn't a deliberate, chosen response, but rather an automatic, involuntary reaction. And so, as a person who eventually decided that he wanted to get off the poison of anger, I eventually realized that it wasn't a virtue, it wasn't a superpower, it was actually poisonous for me. Then I started to investigate how to prevent anger from ever arising. And this is an important thing to note. There's a distinction here, not trying to repress anger, trying to prevent anger, okay? And the only way that I could figure out to do that was by understanding, becoming aware of and understanding my triggers. Because if I can understand my triggers, become aware of them, and I can address perhaps some of the faulty reasoning behind those triggers, then those triggers will either lessen or they might even disappear altogether. I compare it to trying to defuse a bomb. You know, like SWAT teams, they'll come in, oh, they've got the bomb squad, and they like crack open the box and which wire do you cut? That's how I started to view my triggers, as these bombs that are just sitting there waiting to go off unless I diffuse them somehow. And the way to do that is to, first of all, being aware of it, and then to study it and to try and understand it. Now, as James said, very good call out, I have read many books, not more than he's had meals, surely not, but I have read many books because that's where I find a lot of my education and my direction and my guidance. But books in and of themselves, it's just dead wood. There's not anything of value there unless you take the information, integrate it, and then try it out in the real world and see what happens. And that's how you know if something works. It might sound nice, it might feel good, but when you go and you deploy it in the real world, what are the results? What are the effects? So luckily for us, we all have access to the greatest laboratory in existence. Each one of us is a scientist, and your life is a laboratory where you can do experiments and you can try different things and see what the results are. And you can observe those results, right? And so in my quest to vanquish my anger or to find a way to prevent it from arising, I studied the Stoics, who basically are the precursor to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the greatest, most successful forms of therapy alive today. So very much a cognitive approach of auditing yourself, thinking about what you're thinking, questioning your thoughts, questioning your reactions. I also studied a lot of Carl Jung, who, by the way, guy doesn't get enough credit. Everybody talks about Freud, but Freud was lame. Jung, he really revolutionized the game. He really is the founder of psychology, and so many popular psychology terms that all of us use on an everyday basis, things like projection or complex. When we talk about like somebody has a complex, right? All of those things came from Jung. So it's very strange to me that Jung doesn't get the credit he deserves, but that's a whole nother talk and a whole nother point. I think he's a little too dangerous. I think he hit close to home in too many ways. But from the Stoics and from Jung, there are two things that I picked up that I wanted to share with you today because they have been incredibly helpful for me. They've been great reminders. They're quotes that have stayed with me since the first time I read them, and I regularly think about them. And they kind of inform my view and my approach on triggers. So here, let me share those quotes with you real quick here. So the first one is from Jung. He says, everything that irritates us about other people can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Everything that pisses you off about that person over there and that person over there can teach us about ourselves. Thanks, Jung. And here I thought it was everybody else that was the problem, right? The other one that I really, really like from Marcus Aurelius, he says, whenever you're about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question. What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize? So what these two quotes are getting at and what they reflect to me is the mirroring and projection effects that we encounter on a daily basis. We often project our intentions onto people, motives onto people. I saw a really good meme the other day that said, it's easy to figure out how people feel about me. I just make it up in my head. Right? It's easy. Yeah, I know how people feel about me. Yeah, I just make it up. Well, that's what most of us do. Somebody will say something, maybe the tone will be a little off, and we'll immediately start to project. What did I say? I must have done something wrong. Or why is this person such an asshole? Or, right? So projection is big. Mirroring is the other piece that I have found to be very relevant, is that if something in another person triggers me, makes me angry or frustrated or whatever, then that quality in that person is either in me, and so it's mirroring back something about me that I don't like, and maybe I'm not fully aware of it. Or the thing about mirrors too is if you hold writing up in the mirror, you'll see that it's backwards. So sometimes things mirror the exact same thing back to us, but other times people mirror the opposite, right? And so you could get triggered because somebody is doing something that is completely antithetical to your personal views and your morals, right? That's backwards. Or you could be triggered because, hey, that guy's really arrogant, and I don't like arrogant people because I'm arrogant and I don't like that about myself, but I'm not fully aware of it yet. And I have Marcel, my lovely father, to thank for much of what I have learned about triggers. And actually, I have him to thank for my anger too. He was the original rageaholic, and he modeled the behavior very well for me in my house. He kind of showed me that anger and reckless action is a form of power. And so that's where I got the notion of, being angry is a good thing. But the thing with my dad that I learned the last time he triggered me, I realized what it was that was triggering me, right? We used to always get into fights, we get into arguments, we get into, all kinds of screaming matches because we worked together as well in construction. So just to add another layer of complexity to the situation, like your parents trigger you already. Now imagine working on a job site with your dad. So anyways, the last time he triggered me, I realized that one of my triggers is when people share their opinions as if they were absolute certain fact. And when people do that, I have a tendency to get triggered. And why is that, I wonder? Because that's something that I am prone to do, and I've been working very, very hard for a long time to try and change my ways. So when I'm presented with people who are absolutely certain that their uneducated and uninformed opinion is absolute fact, my reaction is to turn to anger. I want to prove, I want to show you. Oh, is that the way it is? Let me show you, right? That's my instinct. So that's something to consider, not a fact, not the truth, but consider that every time you are triggered, there is a lesson in it for you. Now, this doesn't mean that the other person didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't mean that your reaction isn't justified, okay? Sometimes somebody will do something to you and you are absolutely justified to be angry about it. 100% you're justified. But let me ask you this. Are you helped by your anger? You're justified in your anger, but are you helped by your anger? And one thing that I have concluded is that there is no situation in my life where anger makes it better. At best, it won't make it worse, but usually the consequences of my anger are far worse than whatever triggered the response in the first place. Right? And nobody else suffers when you're angry or offended or insulted. No one else knows. You're just holding on to that stuff. So from a pragmatic point of view, not talking about whose fault it is, and well, but this person said this to me and they did that to me, and of course I'm upset. Of course, it's absolutely understandable and justified, but is it helpful? Is it helpful, right? It's only helpful insofar as it forces you to turn around and look at yourself and ask yourself some questions about what it is, because other people, what they say, what they do, how they behave, unfortunately, is outside of your control. Okay, last note, and I I have questions for you, obviously. I want to know what you think. I want to know your experiences with triggers, what you've learned from your triggers, if anything. And situations where maybe being triggered did work out for you. I can't think of situations in my own life, but there could be situations in yours, and I'd be very curious to hear about those, because in my experience, there are no advantages to losing control and having an automatic emotional reaction. So beware of mirroring and projection. Mirroring is a very useful tool. Is this, like Marcus Aurelius said, you know, what quality of theirs most resembles something that I do, right? When you're about to find fault in someone, it forces you to reflect back on yourself. And again, it's not to say that this isn't about like whose fault it is, or like I said before, whether it's a justified reaction or not. This is about what's best for you, right? Your anger might be justified, but if it's just making you sick, the other person doesn't even know you're angry, is it really helping? Right? Now, I should note that there's other types of triggers that are more relevant to, for example, past traumas, like somebody who's experienced a trauma in their past, all of a sudden there's a conversation taking place up here and it brings up memories, right? Those are not the types of triggers that I'm referring to. Those types of triggers are like involuntary, and if anybody here gets triggered at any point in that way, I hope that you know that you're surrounded by people who will embrace you in their loving arms and who will support you and listen to you and honor your truth. So the type of triggering that I'm trying to focus on is more of the triggered in the colloquial sense of the word of I'm offended, or I'm insulted, or I'm angry, right? Because that one, I feel like you have more power in your ability to diffuse those triggers. So expectations, desires, projections, mirroring. Who's holding the gun? I am. I was holding the gun every time I get mad, every time I flip my lid, every time I get bitter. It's my trigger. I'm holding the gun. And if I don't want to get triggered, I should probably find a way to put the gun